Imagine you see your husband feeding another woman's baby. What would you do? The baby spoon stopped halfway to the tiny mouth, and Daniel's eyes met Grace's across the street. He didn't look guilty. He looked terrified. That's when Grace knew everything she believed about her marriage was built on lies. The woman behind him smiled weakly, reaching for the baby he was feeding, but it was the way his hand trembled that made Grace's heart stop. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel for more stories, as it helps us grow. And also let me know which country you are watching me from in the comments. This is Grace's story of how she discovered that sometimes the person you sleep next to every night is a stranger you never really knew at all. 4 years ago, Grace married Daniel Okonkwo in what everyone called the wedding of the year in Port Harcourt. He was a successful logistics manager for an international shipping company. She was a pharmaceutical sales representative who'd worked her way up from nothing. When they met at a business conference in Lagos, he told her she was the most ambitious woman he'd ever met. He said he loved how she refused to depend on anyone, how she'd put herself through university working 3 jobs, how she built her career with her own 2 hands. "You're different from other women," Daniel had said on their 3rd date, holding her hand across the table at a restaurant in Victoria Island. "You don't need a man to complete you. You're already complete." Grace had fallen for those words. She'd fallen for the man who seemed to celebrate her independence rather than feel threatened by it. Within 8 months, he proposed with a ring that made her colleagues gasp. The wedding was beautiful, traditional and white wedding both, with over 500 guests and a reception that lasted until morning. But fairy tales, as Grace learned, don't always have happy endings. The problems started small, so small that Grace almost missed them. Daniel would forget to mention important things, like the time his mother visited from Enugu and stayed for 2 weeks, and he'd only told Grace the morning she arrived. Or when he took a new position that required traveling to Abuja twice a month, and Grace found out from his colleague's wife at a party. "Oh, Daniel didn't tell you," the woman had said, surprised. "My husband said they'll be working together on the Abuja account. They're flying out every other Monday." Grace had smiled through her embarrassment, pretending she knew. That night, she confronted him. "Why didn't you tell me about Abuja?" Daniel had looked up from his laptop, confused. "I did tell you." "No, you didn't." "Grace, I'm sure I mentioned it. You probably weren't listening. You're always so focused on your own work." She had doubted herself then. Maybe she hadn't been listening. Maybe she was too caught up in meeting her sales targets to pay attention to her husband's life. She'd apologized and let it go. That was her first mistake. The second mistake was not questioning the new phone. Daniel came home one evening with a second mobile phone, a cheap Nokia that looked nothing like his expensive Samsung. "It's for work," he'd explained, tossing it on the kitchen counter. "The company wants us to have a separate line for client calls. You know how it is. They don't want to pay for personal calls on the company plan." It made sense. Grace's own company had similar policies. She didn't think about it again until she noticed the Nokia was always with him. In the bathroom, in the bedroom at night, even when he went to get water from the kitchen at 2 a.m. The third mistake was ignoring her instincts about Jennifer. Jennifer was Daniel's colleague, a supply chain analyst who'd joined the company about 18 months into their marriage. Daniel mentioned her often, always in passing, always about work. Jennifer suggested a new vendor for the Lagos route. Jennifer found an error in the customs documentation that saved us thousands. "Jennifer and I have to work late tonight to finish the quarterly report." Grace met Jennifer once at a company event. She was beautiful in a quiet way, with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, intelligent eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine when she congratulated Grace on her recent promotion. "Daniel talks about you all the time," Jennifer had said. "He's so proud of you." Grace had liked her. That was the problem. She'd liked the woman who was slowly taking pieces of her husband away. The late nights became more frequent. The Abuja trips stretched from 2 days to 4, sometimes 5. Daniel was always tired, always stressed, always on that Nokia phone. When Grace tried to be intimate, he'd sigh and say he was exhausted from work. When she suggested they take a weekend trip to reconnect, he'd say he had too much on his plate. "You're being needy," he'd said one night when she'd complained about never seeing him. I thought you were independent. I thought you understood about careers and ambition." His words had cut deep because they were designed to. They targeted her pride, her sense of self. Grace had backed off, thrown herself into her own work, traveled for her own conferences, and pretended everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. 2 years into the marriage, Grace's mother visited from their village in Rivers State. Margaret was a sharp woman who'd raised 4 children alone after Grace's father died. She noticed things. "Where is your husband?" Margaret asked on the 3rd day of her visit when Daniel had left before dawn and not returned by dinner time. "Working, Mama. You know how these corporate jobs are." Margaret had looked at her daughter with eyes that had seen too much of life. A man who is always working is either building something for his family or building something with someone else. "Mama, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm finishing something." "Open your eyes, Grace. A marriage is like a garden. If your husband is never home, whose garden is he tending?" Grace had been angry with her mother then, angry because the words felt true. But she'd pushed the conversation away, made excuses for Daniel, and counted the days until her mother went home so she could stop seeing her marriage through someone else's critical eyes. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Grace had been in Warri for a conference, but the event ended early when one of the keynote speakers fell ill. She drove back to Port Harcourt a day early, planning to surprise Daniel with his favorite pepper soup and maybe, finally, reconnect with her husband. She'd stopped at the market, bought fresh catfish and goat meat, all the spices, and even picked up a bottle of wine. She was humming as she unlocked their front door, arms full of shopping bags, already planning the evening. The house was quiet. Daniel's car was in the driveway, but he wasn't in the living room or kitchen. Grace set down the bags and walked toward the bedroom. Maybe he was taking an afternoon nap. Maybe they could start their evening even earlier. She was 5 steps from the bedroom when she heard it. A woman's voice, soft and tired, coming from inside. "Daniel, I don't know if I can keep doing this." Grace's hand froze on the door handle. Daniel's voice responded, low and soothing. "I know it's hard, Jennifer. I know. But we're almost there, just a little longer. She's going to find out. What we've been doing, it's too big to hide forever. She won't find out if we're careful. I've managed this long, haven't I?" Grace's heart was hammering so hard she thought they'd hear it through the door. Her hand turned the handle slowly, silently. The door opened. Daniel and Jennifer were sitting on Grace's bed, but they weren't in each other's arms. They weren't kissing. Jennifer was crying, her face in her hands, and Daniel was holding what looked like a stack of documents. Both of them looked up as the door opened. The expressions on their faces weren't guilt, they were panic. "Grace," Daniel stood up so fast the papers scattered. "You're not supposed to be back until tomorrow." "Clearly," Grace said, her voice shaking. "Should I leave so you two can finish your conversation, or should I pack my bags first?" "It's not what you think," Jennifer said, wiping her eyes. "Really," Grace laughed, a bitter sound, "because I think my husband is having an affair with his colleague in our bedroom. What am I missing?" Daniel moved toward her, hands out like he was approaching a wild animal. "Grace, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain why another woman is in my bedroom. Explain why you've been lying to me for months. Explain why she's crying on my bed." "She's not crying because of what you think," Daniel said. "Jennifer is sick, Grace. She's very sick." Grace stopped. "What?" Jennifer stood up, unsteady. She was thinner than Grace remembered from the company event. Her eyes were sunken, her skin had a grayish tone. "I have kidney disease," Jennifer said quietly. "Stage 4 renal failure. I've been on dialysis for 8 months." The room spun. Grace grabbed the doorframe. "Daniel has been helping me," Jennifer continued, "with medical bills, with transport to treatments, with the paperwork for a transplant. I don't have family in Port Harcourt. My parents are dead. I have a brother in Calabar, but he's unemployed with 4 children. Daniel has been the only one helping me." Grace looked at her husband. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because every time I try to tell you about anything in my life, you're too busy with your own work. You're always traveling, always at conferences, always meeting sales targets. When was I supposed to tell you? Between your trips to Lagos and Abuja, during the 5 minutes we see each other before bed. The accusation hit like a slap. That's not fair, isn't it? Daniel's voice rose. You want an independent life? You have it. You want your own career? You have it. But you can't have all of that and also complain when I deal with things on my own. This isn't dealing with things on your own, Grace shouted. This is lying to me. This is hiding a whole relationship from me. It's not a relationship, Jennifer said, her voice weak. Daniel loves you, Grace. He talks about you constantly. He's been helping me because he's a good person, not because there's anything between us. Grace wanted to believe it, but trust, once broken, doesn't repair easily. I need you to leave, Grace said to Jennifer. Both of you, I need to think. Daniel stepped closer. Grace, this is my house too. Is it? Because I feel like I don't know whose house this is anymore. I don't know whose life I'm living. I don't even know who you are. She'd left then, grabbed her car keys and driven to her friend Paula's house in Transamadi. Paula was a nurse at the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, divorced, and the only person Grace trusted to tell the truth. Paula had listened to the whole story while making strong tea and bringing out a bottle of gin. So your husband is either having an emotional affair with a dying woman, Paula said, or he's telling the truth and he's just been helping her. The question is, which one do you believe? I don't know what to believe anymore. Then verify it. I work at the hospital. If this Jennifer is really on dialysis, there will be records. Give me her full name. Grace had given her the information and Paula had returned 2 hours later with confirmation. Jennifer Adewale, age 32, diagnosed with chronic kidney disease 2 years ago, on the transplant waiting list, regular dialysis patient. She's telling the truth about being sick, Paula said, but that doesn't mean there's nothing between them emotionally. A man who's hiding something this big from his wife, there's always a reason. Grace had gone home the next morning. Daniel was in the kitchen making breakfast, or trying to. He'd burned the eggs and the toast was charcoal. I'm sorry, he said when he saw her. I should have told you about Jennifer from the beginning. I should have trusted you with the truth. Why didn't you? He set down the spatula and turned to face her. Because I knew you'd do exactly what you did. You'd make it about us, about our marriage, about whether I was cheating. Jennifer needed help, and I knew that if I told you, you'd either forbid me from helping, or you'd insist on being involved in every decision. I just wanted to do something good without it becoming complicated. Marriage is supposed to be complicated together, Grace said. We're supposed to share these things. Are we? Because from where I'm standing, we've been living separate lives for 2 years. You do your thing, I do mine, and we meet in the middle for Sunday dinners and family events. That's not a marriage, Grace. That's a business partnership. His words hurt because they were partially true. They'd both been so focused on their careers, on building their own lives, that they'd forgotten to build a life together. So what do we do? Grace asked. I don't know, but I'm going to keep helping Jennifer. She has no one else. Grace had agreed reluctantly. She'd met with Jennifer, apologized for her reaction, and even contributed some money toward the medical bills. The next 6 months passed in an uncomfortable truce. Grace and Daniel were polite to each other, but the warmth was gone. They were roommates who shared a bed, but not a life. Then Jennifer got the call. A kidney was available. The transplant was scheduled for July 15th. Daniel was at the hospital every day before the surgery, handling paperwork, talking to doctors, and making sure Jennifer had everything she needed. Grace went a few times, but it felt forced, like she was checking a box labeled supportive wife without really feeling it. The night before the surgery, Daniel came home late. Grace was already in bed reading a novel she'd picked up at the airport. Jennifer asked me to be her emergency contact, Daniel said from the doorway. She has no one else to list. Okay. You're not angry? I'm tired, Daniel. I'm tired of being angry. Do what you need to do. He'd stood there for a long moment, then nodded and left the room. Grace had listened to him take a shower, heard him settle onto the couch in the living room where he'd been sleeping for the past month, and finally allowed herself to cry into her pillow. The surgery was successful. Grace had gone to the hospital the day after to see Jennifer, brought flowers and magazines, and played the role of the concerned friend. Jennifer was weak but smiling, grateful for the second chance at life. Thank you, Jennifer had said, squeezing Grace's hand. for letting him help me. I know it wasn't easy for you. You needed help, that's what matters." But when Grace had left the hospital room and walked down the corridor to get coffee from the vending machine, she had seen something that made her blood run cold. Daniel was in a private waiting area at the end of the hall. He wasn't alone. A woman Grace didn't recognize was with him, and she was holding a baby. The woman was light-skinned, petite, with braided hair and tired eyes. She looked like she'd been crying. Daniel was holding the baby, feeding it with a small spoon, talking softly. The woman was gesturing, clearly distressed about something. And the way Daniel held that baby, gentle and practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Grace's coffee cup slipped from her hands and hit the floor, hot liquid splashing everywhere. The sound made Daniel look up. Their eyes met across the corridor. He didn't look guilty. He looked terrified. Grace walked toward them, her legs moving on autopilot. Daniel stood up, still holding the baby, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words. "Grace," he finally said, This is Rita." The woman, Rita, looked between them with wide eyes. "You didn't tell her," she said to Daniel, her voice sharp. "You said you would tell her months ago. Tell me what?" Grace heard her own voice from very far away. Daniel looked at the baby in his arms, at Rita, at Grace. "This is Emmanuel," he said quietly. "He's 9 months old." The corridor tilted. Grace grabbed the wall. "He's my son," Daniel finished. The words didn't make sense. They were in English. Grace understood each individual word, but together they formed something impossible. "Your son," Grace repeated. Rita stood up, angry now. "I told you this would happen. I told you that you can't hide a child forever. But no, you kept saying you needed more time. The situation was delicate. Your wife wouldn't understand." "Shut up, Rita," Daniel said sharply. "Don't tell me to shut up. I've been silent for a year. I've let you see him whenever you want. I've never asked you for anything except to be honest with your wife about his existence. And you couldn't even do that." Grace's mind was spinning through dates, through timelines, through Daniel's schedules and trips and late nights. "A year," she said. "You've known about him for a year." "Grace, please, let me explain." "You've been paying for Jennifer's medical treatment," Grace said, her voice getting louder. "Visiting her in the hospital, helping with her paperwork, while you have a whole child hidden somewhere. Where does he live? Where have you been seeing him?" "Rita lives in Rumuokoro," Daniel said. "I see him when I can." "When you can," Grace repeated. She started laughing, a high, hysterical sound that made nurses at the nearby station look over. "When you can, between business trips, between helping dying colleagues. When exactly do you fit in your secret child?" Rita stepped forward. "Mrs. Okonkwo, I'm sorry you found out this way, but Emmanuel deserves to have his father in his life. Daniel made a mistake 2 years ago, but that doesn't mean his son should suffer." 2 years ago? Grace's laughter died. "We've been married for 4 years. You're telling me that when we'd been married for 2 years, he got you pregnant?" Rita's silence was answer enough. Grace looked at Daniel, really looked at him. The man holding that baby wasn't the man she'd married. Or maybe he was. Maybe this was always who he was, and she'd been too blind to see it. "How did it happen?" Grace asked, her voice dead. "It doesn't matter," Daniel said. "It matters to me." Daniel shifted the baby, who was starting to fuss. "We met at a hotel bar in Abuja. I was there for work. She was there for a conference. We talked, we drank too much, and we made a mistake. One night, Grace." "It was one night." "One night that created a whole person," Grace said. "One night that you've been lying about for over a year." "I didn't know," Daniel said. "Rita didn't tell me she was pregnant until after Emmanuel was born. She said she didn't want to disrupt my marriage, that she could handle it alone. But when she called me last year, when she was struggling, I couldn't just abandon my son." "But you could abandon your wife," Grace said. "You could lie to me every single day for a year. You could let me believe we had problems because of Jennifer, because of work stress, because of my ambition, when the real problem was that you're a cheater and a liar." Emmanuel started crying, a thin wail that echoed in the corridor. Rita took him from Daniel, bouncing him gently. "I should go," she said. "This isn't the place for this conversation." "Wait," Grace said. Rita stopped, surprised. "How old is he exactly?" 9 months and 2 weeks. Grace did the math in her head. So he was conceived in October, 2 years ago. October. She looked at Daniel. Our anniversary month. We went to that resort in Calabar to try to save our marriage, remember? We spent 3 days trying to reconnect. We talked about starting a family. Daniel's face went grey. And then you flew to Abuja for work, Grace continued. You called me from there every night. You told me you missed me. You said the trip had made you realize how much you loved me. Her voice broke. You were sleeping with someone else while telling me you loved me. I did love you, Daniel said desperately. I do love you. You love yourself, Grace said. That's the only person you've ever loved. She turned and walked away, leaving him holding his lies in that hospital corridor. She walked past nurses and patients and visitors, walked out of the hospital into the parking lot, got in her car and drove. She didn't know where she was going until she pulled up outside Paula's house again. Paula took one look at her face and pulled her inside without questions. He has a son, Grace said when she could finally speak. A 9-month-old son with another woman. He's been lying about it for a year. Paula swore viciously in Igbo, a stream of curses that would have made their grandmothers proud. Then she poured them both large glasses of gin. What are you going to do? Paula asked after Grace had told her everything. I don't know. I don't even know who I am anymore. My whole marriage is a lie. 4 years of my life, wasted on someone who doesn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. So you divorce him. And then what? I'm 34 years old, starting over. Everyone will say I failed. My mother will say she warned me. People will whisper that I was too focused on my career to keep my husband happy. Let them whisper, Paula said fiercely. You deserve better than this, better than a man who cheats, better than a man who lies, better than a man who makes you question your own worth. Grace stayed at Paula's house for 3 days before Daniel found her. He came to the door looking exhausted, beard grown out, eyes red. We need to talk, he said. They talked for hours. Daniel explained everything, how the affair with Rita had been a drunken mistake, how he'd tried to forget about it, how shocked he'd been when Rita called him to say she'd had his baby. He explained that he'd been supporting Rita financially, visiting Emmanuel once a week, and trying to figure out how to tell Grace. I was going to tell you after Jennifer's surgery, Daniel said. I was waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment to tell your wife you have a secret child, Grace said. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Grace. But I'm asking you, begging you to forgive me. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild. How? Grace asked. How do we rebuild when the foundation was rotten from the start? You cheated on me during our anniversary trip. You lied to me for a year. You have a child with another woman. What exactly are we rebuilding on? On the fact that I love you, Daniel said. On 4 years of marriage. On everything we've built together. We haven't built anything together. We've been living separate lives, remember? You said it yourself. This isn't a marriage, it's a business partnership. Daniel reached for her hands, but she pulled away. Grace, please, don't throw away our marriage because of one mistake. One mistake? Grace laughed. You made 1,000 mistakes, Daniel. Every day for a year that you didn't tell me the truth was another mistake. Every time you left our house to go see your son and lied about where you were going was another mistake. Every time you looked me in the eyes and pretended to be faithful was another mistake. So that's it? Daniel stood up, angry now. You're just going to give up. Walk away without even trying. I'm walking away because there's nothing left to try for. You killed our marriage the night you slept with Rita. Everything since then has just been me living in the corpse of something that was already dead. Grace filed for divorce a week later. Daniel fought it initially, but when Grace's lawyer presented evidence of the affair, the hidden child, and the financial support Daniel had been providing without Grace's knowledge, he backed down. But there was one more twist Grace hadn't anticipated. During the divorce proceedings, Grace's lawyer discovered something strange in their joint financial records. Large sums of money had been disappearing from their savings account over the past 2 years. Not just the money for Jennifer's treatment or support for Rita and Emmanuel. Much larger amounts transferred to an account Grace didn't recognize. Mrs. Okonkwo, her lawyer said during one of their meetings, I think your husband has been hiding more than just a child. These transfers, they total almost 3 million naira over 2 years. Do you know anything about this? Grace didn't. She confronted Daniel about it during one of their mandatory mediation sessions. What account? Daniel said, but his eyes shifted left. He was lying. The one you've been transferring money to for 2 years. What is it for? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. It's for my other business. What other business? I've been starting a logistics company on the side, using our savings to fund it. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd say it was too risky, that we should save for a house upgrade or for children or whatever. Grace stared at him. You used our joint savings to start a business without telling me? It's my money too, Daniel said defensively. It's our money. That's what joint means. How much have you taken? About 3 million, but the business is doing well. I'll pay it back. Grace's lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Okonkwo, starting a business with marital funds without your spouse's consent could be considered financial fraud. Daniel's face went pale. I was going to tell her once it was profitable. You were going to tell me a lot of things, Grace said. Eventually, when the time was right, when it was convenient for you, but you never actually tell me anything, do you? You just take what you want and worry about the consequences later. The discovery of the hidden business changed the divorce settlement significantly. Grace was awarded not just half of their marital assets, but also compensation for the money Daniel had taken without her knowledge. The judge was not sympathetic to Daniel's explanations. Mr. Okonkwo, the judge had said, marriage is a partnership built on trust and transparency. You have demonstrated neither. Mrs. Okonkwo will receive 70% of all marital assets, including your share of the logistics company you started with her money. Daniel had looked shocked. His lawyer tried to object, but the evidence was clear. He'd hidden a child, hidden an affair, hidden a business, and hidden financial transfers. The pattern of deception was undeniable. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Grace got the house, most of their savings, a stake in Daniel's secret logistics company, and her freedom. Daniel got visitation rights with Emmanuel and a hard lesson about the cost of lies. But even with the divorce final, the revelations weren't over. 3 weeks after the papers were signed, Grace received a visitor at her office, a woman named Blessing, who said she had information Grace needed to know. I'm Daniel's sister, Blessing said when Grace invited her into a conference room. Grace was confused. Daniel told me he only has one sister and she lives in London. He has 2 sisters, Blessing said. I'm the one he doesn't talk about, the one he pretends doesn't exist. Why? Blessing took a deep breath. Because I opposed his marriage to you from the beginning. Not because of you, but because I know my brother. I know what he's capable of. What do you mean? Daniel has done this before. His first marriage, before he met you. He never told you about that, did he? Grace felt the room tilt. He was married before. For 2 years, to a woman named Kioma. He cheated on her too, got another woman pregnant, hid it from her, and when she found out, he convinced everyone it was her fault. That she wasn't woman enough to keep him satisfied. He destroyed her reputation, took everything in the divorce, and moved on like she never existed. Why are you telling me this now? Blessing's eyes filled with tears. Because Kioma killed herself 3 months after the divorce. She couldn't handle the shame, the gossip, the way people blamed her for her husband's infidelity. I tried to warn you before you married Daniel, but he made sure we never met. He cut me out of his life because I knew the truth about who he really is. Grace felt sick. Where is Kioma's family? They want nothing to do with Daniel, but they asked me to find you, to make sure you were okay. When they heard about your divorce, they were afraid you might, they were worried. I'm not going to kill myself over Daniel Okonkwo, Grace said firmly. He's not worth that. Good, Blessing said. Because you're stronger than Kioma was. She loved him so much that losing him broke her. But you, I've been following your story through mutual friends. You didn't let him break you. You fought back. You won. After Blessing left, Grace sat in her office for a long time thinking about Kioma. About a woman who'd loved the wrong man and paid for it with her life. About how close Grace herself had come to losing herself in Daniel's lies. That evening, Grace went home and stood in front of her bathroom mirror, really looking at herself for the first time in months. She'd lost weight during the divorce. There were new lines around her eyes, but there was also something else. A strength that hadn't been there before, a hardness that came from surviving something that should have destroyed her. She thought about calling Daniel, about confronting him about Kioma. But what would be the point? He'd already shown her exactly who he was. Learning about his past wouldn't change anything about her future. Instead, Grace called Kioma's family. She spoke with Kioma's mother, a woman whose voice was still heavy with grief even years after her daughter's death. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Grace said. "I wish I'd known about her. I wish I could have done something." "You've done something," Kioma's mother said. "You survived him. You got away. My daughter couldn't. But knowing that you did, knowing that he didn't destroy you too, that gives me some peace." "I'd like to do something in Kioma's memory," Grace said. "A scholarship fund maybe, or a support group for women going through difficult divorces. Something that turns her tragedy into something that helps others." "She would have liked that," Kioma's mother said softly. "She always wanted to help people. Even at the end, even when she was suffering, she was worried about being a burden to others." Grace spent the next 3 months setting up the Kioma Foundation, a non-profit organization that provided counseling, legal support, and financial assistance to women going through divorces. She used part of her settlement from Daniel to fund it, finding a bitter satisfaction in using his money to help other women escape men like him. The foundation's opening ceremony was 6 months after her divorce was finalized. Grace's mother was there, proud and teary-eyed. Paula was there with several other nurses from the hospital who'd pledged to volunteer. Jennifer was there too, healthy and glowing, ready to serve on the foundation's board. "This is beautiful," Jennifer said, looking around at the small office space Grace had rented in the heart of Port Harcourt. "Kioma would be so proud." "You knew about her?" Grace asked, surprised. Jennifer nodded. "I found out after I told you Daniel and I were cousins. I asked my aunt, Daniel's mother, about his past. She told me about Kioma, about how the family tried to cover it up, pretend it never happened. I wanted to tell you, but by then the divorce was already underway." "It's okay," Grace said. "I'm just glad I know now, glad I can do something good with what he put me through." 3 months after that conversation, Grace was at the foundation office late one evening, reviewing applications for legal assistance when Jennifer called. "Grace, I need to tell you something. It's about Daniel." "What now?" "He's engaged to Rita." Grace was silent for a moment, then laughed. "Well, at least he's not hiding her anymore." "Grace, there's more. Rita is pregnant again." "Good for them." "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset? He's not my problem anymore. He's Rita's problem now, and I genuinely hope she's prepared for what that means." But a week later, Rita herself showed up at the foundation office. She looked tired and scared, carrying Emmanuel on her hip. "Mrs. Okonkwo, I mean Grace. Can I talk to you?" Grace invited her into the office, offered her tea and waited. He's doing it again," Rita said finally. "He's cheating. I found messages on his phone. He's seeing someone from his office." Grace wasn't surprised. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I don't know. You were married to him. How did you deal with it? How did you stay strong?" "I didn't stay strong in the marriage," Grace said honestly. "I let him make me doubt myself. I let him convince me I was the problem. It wasn't until I left that I became strong. But I have Emmanuel and another baby coming. I can't just leave." "You can always leave," Grace said. "It won't be easy, but it's possible, and if you decide you want to, we can help you. That's what this foundation is for." Rita looked around the office, at the posters on the walls about women's rights and domestic support services. "He told me you were bitter, that you were trying to destroy him with this foundation." "I'm not trying to destroy him. I'm trying to help women who are dealing with men like him. There's a difference." Rita left without making any decisions, but she took a handful of brochures with her. Grace watched her go, hoping she'd find the strength to leave before Daniel destroyed her the way he'd destroyed Kioma. 1 year after the divorce, Grace was promoted to regional sales director, overseeing all pharmaceutical sales in the southern states. The promotion came with a corner office, a company car, and a salary that made her mother cry with pride. She moved into a new apartment in GRA, smaller than the house she'd shared with Daniel, but entirely hers. She decorated it exactly how she wanted, with bright colors and plants and books everywhere. Paula helped her pick out furniture, and Grace's mother came to visit for the housewarming, proud and worried in equal measure. "You're doing well," Margaret said, looking around the apartment. "But are you happy?" "I'm getting there, Mama." "Good, because happiness isn't found in a man or a marriage. It's found in here." She tapped Grace's chest over her heart. "You had to lose everything to find yourself. Now don't lose yourself again." The foundation grew steadily. By the end of the first year, they'd helped 43 women navigate divorces, provided counseling to 78 more, and prevented 3 suicides through their crisis hotline. Grace poured herself into the work, finding purpose in helping others escape the kind of pain she'd endured. Then one evening, 18 months after the divorce, Grace got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Grace Okonkwo?" a man's voice asked. "This is Grace. Who's calling?" "My name is Detective James Okoli. I'm calling about your ex-husband, Daniel Okonkwo. We need you to come to the station for some questions." Grace's heart sank. "What's happened?" "I'd rather discuss it in person, ma'am. Can you come tomorrow morning?" She arrived at the police station at 9 a.m. sharp, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Daniel done something illegal with his business? Was this about the money he'd hidden during their marriage? Detective Okoli was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He sat her down in an interview room and placed a file on the table between them. "Mrs. Okonkwo, what was your relationship with Jennifer Adewale?" Grace blinked. "Jennifer? She's Daniel's cousin. We're friends now. Why?" "When was the last time you spoke with her?" 2 days ago. She called about a foundation event. Why? What's going on?" Detective Okoli opened the file. "Jennifer Adewale died 3 days ago. Her body was found in her apartment. The cause of death appears to be poisoning." The room spun. "What?" "No, that's impossible. She was fine. She was healthy. The transplant worked. We're treating it as a suspicious death. We're interviewing everyone who had close contact with her in the weeks before she died." He paused. "Including your ex-husband." "Daniel? Why would Daniel? Wait, you think someone killed her?" "We're investigating all possibilities. Your ex-husband was the last person to see her alive. They had dinner at her apartment the night she died." Grace's mind raced. But they're cousins. Daniel would never hurt Jennifer. He spent 2 years helping her, paying for her treatment. "That's what makes it interesting," Detective Okoli said. "We've been looking into Jennifer's finances. Did you know she recently received a very large settlement from a medical malpractice lawsuit related to her initial kidney diagnosis?" "How large?" 15 million naira. Grace sat back hard in her chair. "I had no idea." Neither did most people. She'd only told a few close friends and family members, including your ex-husband. He pulled out another document. She also changed her will 2 months before she died. Previously, her estate was going to be split between her brother in Calabar and a church charity, but in the new will, she left everything to Daniel Okonkwo. "No," Grace whispered. "No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. Mrs. Okonkwo, I need you to tell me everything you know about your ex-husband's relationship with Jennifer Adewale. And I need you to tell me the truth." Grace told him everything, about finding Jennifer and Daniel together, about the kidney disease, about how Daniel had helped her through treatment. She told him about discovering Daniel's affair with Rita, about the hidden child, about the secret business. "He's a liar and a cheater," Grace said. "But a murderer? I don't know if he's capable of that." "People are capable of a lot when money is involved," Detective Okoli said, "especially people who are already comfortable with deception." Grace left the police station in a daze. She called Paula immediately. "Jennifer is dead. The police think Daniel killed her for her inheritance." Paula was silent for a long moment. "Did he do it?" "I don't know. A year ago I would have said no, but now? I don't know what he's capable of." The investigation moved quickly. Police discovered that Daniel had been pressing Jennifer to lend him money for his logistics business. His company was failing, bleeding money, and he was desperate. Jennifer had refused, saying she wanted to use her settlement to help other kidney disease patients. 3 days later, Daniel was arrested. The police had found evidence that he'd purchased rat poison 2 weeks before Jennifer's death. Traces of the same poison were found in Jennifer's system. The trial was a media sensation. Port Harcourt society was scandalized. The successful businessman who'd hidden a child, stolen from his wife, and now allegedly murdered his cousin for money. Grace was called to testify about Daniel's character, about his pattern of deception. In your marriage, the prosecutor asked, did you ever fear for your safety? Grace thought about it carefully. No. Daniel never physically harmed me, but he killed who I was in other ways. He killed my trust, my confidence, my sense of reality. He's capable of destruction. Whether that extends to murder, I can't say for certain. Rita testified too, revealing that Daniel had been pressuring her to invest her savings in his failing business, that he'd been violent with her twice, pushing her against a wall during arguments, that she'd been planning to leave him when he was arrested. Daniel's defense was that Jennifer had committed suicide, overwhelmed by guilt over changing her will and cutting out her brother. But the prosecution proved that the poison had been in food Daniel had prepared for their dinner. The rat poison had been purchased with Daniel's credit card. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was guilty of second-degree murder. Daniel was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Grace was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Daniel looked at her across the room, his eyes empty and defeated. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, no closure, just a deep sadness for Jennifer, for Keoma, for all the lives Daniel had damaged or destroyed. After the trial, Grace threw herself even deeper into the foundation's work. They renamed it the Keoma and Jennifer Foundation, honoring both women who'd suffered because of Daniel's selfishness. The foundation expanded to include support for victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. Rita came to work at the foundation as a counselor, sharing her story with other women who were trapped in abusive relationships. She and Grace became friends, bonded by their shared experience of surviving Daniel Okonkwo. I should have listened when you tried to warn me, Rita said one day over lunch. When you looked at me in that hospital corridor, I could see in your eyes that you were trying to tell me something. I didn't know what to tell you, Grace admitted. I was still figuring it out myself. He almost destroyed me too, Rita said. Like he destroyed Keoma, like he tried to destroy you, but we survived. That has to mean something. 2 years after Daniel's conviction, Grace was at a medical conference in Lagos when she met Dr. Michael Eze, a cardiologist who ran a free clinic in Ajagunle. They were both attending a panel on healthcare access in underserved communities. You're Grace Okonkwo, he said during the coffee break. I've read about the Keoma and Jennifer Foundation. What you're doing is incredible. Thank you. And what you're doing with the free clinic is amazing. How do you manage funding? They talked for hours, first about their work, then about their lives. Michael was divorced too, with a 9-year-old daughter he co-parented with his ex-wife. He was honest about his past, about his mistakes, about what he'd learned. I'm not looking to rush into anything, Grace told him on their third meeting, which had definitely become a date rather than a professional discussion. Good, Michael said, neither am I, but I am looking to know someone real, someone who's been through things and came out stronger, someone who doesn't need me but might want me around anyway. That sounds like a tall order. You sound like exactly that person, Grace smiled. We'll see. And maybe they would. Or maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in years, Grace was open to the possibility. Open to trust again, but carefully, with boundaries and self-respect intact. Open to love again, but only if it came with honesty and partnership. She thought about the woman she'd been 4 years ago, marrying Daniel in that beautiful ceremony, believing she'd found her happily ever after. That woman had been naive but hopeful. She'd believed in fairy tales and perfect endings. The woman she was now knew better. She knew that endings weren't always happy, but they were always necessary. She knew that betrayal could break you or remake you, and the choice was yours. She knew that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Grace had been shattered when she saw Daniel feeding another woman's baby in that hospital corridor, but from those shattered pieces, she'd built something new, something stronger, something entirely her own. She'd built a foundation that helped other women escape the kind of nightmare she'd survived. She'd built friendships with women like Paula and Rita and Jennifer's family, connections forged through shared pain and shared survival. And she'd built herself back up, piece by piece, into someone who knew her worth. Someone who wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. Someone who understood that being alone was better than being with someone who made you feel alone. Grace wasn't looking for a fairy tale anymore. She was living a real story, with real struggles and real victories. And that, she had learned, was so much better than any fantasy could ever be. She'd been shattered by the truth about Daniel, but from those broken pieces, she'd created something beautiful. A life of purpose, a foundation that helped others, friendships that sustained her, and maybe, just maybe, a love that was real. And that was its own kind of happy ending. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and please subscribe to this channel. We post videos every single day. Bye.